There's a scandal overshadowing the Paris Olympics. And no, it's not this. It has everything to do with China. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. It's another Summer Olympics, which means another chance for China to win gold and show everyone they're the best country. And they'll dope as many young athletes as necessary to prove it. Because it turns out, as unbelievable as it may seem, China isn't the best at following rules imposed by international organizations. One whistleblower, a former doctor for top Chinese athletes, claimed in 2017 that more than 10,000 Chinese athletes doped in a state-backed program in the 1980s and 1990s. Wow, that's the most Chinese citizens that received a shot from the government since Tiananmen Square. But this is crazy. Are you telling me that these Chinese athletes might have been doping? Their names, by the way, are Liao Mengshui and Tong Zhenhuang. Two champion Chinese female athletes. They're female. But I mean, that doping scandal was ages ago. Certainly there's no reason to believe that doped up Chinese athletes are competing in Paris, right? Yeah, what's that, Shelley? So it would appear that, in fact, there's a massive doping scandal casting doubt at the Paris Olympics. So what's the scandal? Well, back in April, the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, confirmed that 23 Chinese swimmers tested positive before the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Yes, you heard that right. They tested positive in 2021, but the story broke earlier this year, which is part of the scandal. And yet, these swimmers were allowed to compete and win at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Maybe they were afraid of what would happen if they tried blocking China from entering their waters. The 23 Chinese swimmers tested positive for trimetazidine, or TMZ, which is a heart medication that has been used to increase stamina and recovery time during heavy training. Not to be mistaken for TMZ that tries getting pics of celebrities throwing up after eating too much Chipotle, which is any amount of Chipotle for the record. The China Anti-Doping Agency, or China, claimed that the swimmers had tested positive for extremely low concentration of TMZ after inadvertently being exposed to the substance through contamination and should not be held responsible for the positive results. And WADA never conducted an independent on-the-ground investigation. Partially, they said, because the pandemic made it difficult for anyone to enter China. Instead, it just carried out a review using samples and data provided by China. Because China has a history of telling nothing but the truth. I know, because China told me so. In the end, WADA took China's anti-doping agency at its word that the athletes accidentally ate burgers contaminated with the drug at a hotel. Pretty strange if I do say so myself, especially considering that TMZ isn't given to livestock, and neither kitchen staff nor guests at the hotel tested positive for it. In fact, the only evidence provided were trace amounts of the drug in sink drains, spice containers, and cooktop vents in the hotel kitchen, which means there's only one explanation. Taiwan secretly doused the athletes' meat in TMZ to make them look bad. They're the bad guys here. Even two of WADA's top scientists weren't convinced that the contamination explanation made any sense. But when it comes to something that might make China look bad, who cares about digging too deeply? And to make matters worse, China named 11 out of the 23 swimmers that tested positive for doping back in 2021 on the roster for its Paris Olympics team. Keep that in mind when you see China swim. The weirdest thing is WADA's inconsistency. Somehow, WADA thought that it was okay for Chinese athletes to accidentally consume TMZ, but not when Russian athletes made the same claim. WADA banned a Russian skater who said she tested positive after eating a contaminated strawberry dessert ahead of the Beijing 2022 Winter Games. What makes her case different? Well, many suspect that WADA is kissing up to China. After all, WADA only just admitted to that 3-year-old Chinese doping scandal after the New York Times broke the story. WADA privately cleared the swimmers of wrongdoing and allowed them to compete at Tokyo 2021, where 2 of them went on to win Olympic golds. To make matters worse, the New York Times also reported another case of Chinese swimmers twice testing positive for drugs, and they kept on swimming. WADA's excuse is that it didn't come out with the details about the case because it didn't want to run the risk of outing people who might be innocent. It also claimed that it wasn't in a position to disprove China's claims. But, like mustard flavor ice cream, many aren't buying it. In fact, athletes like Olympian champion Michael Phelps says athletes have lost faith in WADA since the scandal.
As athletes, our faith can no longer be blindly placed in the world of anti-doping agency, an organization that continues to prove that it is either incapable or unwilling to enforce its policies consistently around the world.
He thinks they're either incompetent or malicious? That's ridiculous. It could be both. U.S. anti-doping agency CEO Travis Tygart also criticized WADA, arguing that it and China have secretly, until now, swept these positives under the carpet. In response, WADA said it was considering legal action against USADA and Tygart for accusing it of a cover-up. Methinks he doth protest too much. And guess what WADA did next? Earlier this month, WADA put the U.S. anti-doping agency under compliance review, which in turn could jeopardize America hosting the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles and the 2023 Olympics in Salt Lake City. The FBI and Justice Department are now opening a criminal investigation into the Chinese doping scandal. But oh, guess what? The Association of Summer Olympic International Federation says that probe could keep the U.S. from hosting future events. It cites fear for the personal safety of athletes. They're definitely not making a coordinated effort to stop an investigation into Chinese doping. By the way, the International Olympic Committee is now trying to crush U.S. probes into Chinese doping by also threatening Salt Lake City's bid to host the Winter Olympics. It says the only way they can host the Games is if they recognize the sole authority of WADA. I mean, why would they question it? We can only speculate as to why the International Olympic Committee is behaving this way. We do know that the IOC tends to favor China, like when they gave the 2022 Winter Olympics to Beijing, despite Beijing not having any snow. Then there's the Samaranch Foundation, named after Juan Antonio Samaranch, who led the IOC for 2 decades, hosted events in Xinjiang and Tibet where China's committing genocide, and profited off of slave labor. I guess the Olympics are all about that gold. The CCP hates when I scrutinize what people who defend China do. That's why Chinese state-run media has called China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. So join what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army on patreon.com/China Uncensored. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll respond to one of your questions or comments at the end of these episodes. And today's comes from Insider. Wondering how exactly you are planning to walk the nonpartisan tightrope when the gross malfeasance of one party makes your job essentially impossible. I'm not going to tell you which party Insider was talking about. So this is maybe more of a question about my other channel, America Uncovered, but a lot of it applies here too. So being nonpartisan is easy. I give praise and criticism where it's due. I gave Biden just as much praise for the good things he did on China as I did to Trump. When the media releases purposefully misleading, edited videos about Biden and Trump, I call it out. So when the Democratic Party forced out Biden against his wishes and installed Harris as their presidential nominee with no feedback from voters, I can criticize that because it's undemocratic. That isn't being biased or partisan. I don't feel compelled to say everything one party does is good or bad. Really, it's not hard. That's how all the news should be. Sadly, it's very rare these days, which is why I created America Uncovered. If you haven't seen the show, check out this video. I think you'll really like it because I stand behind our work on that show. Thank you for your question and your support, Insider. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.